I'm Mia, an average no-life webtoon reader. Now, I was supposed to make a video in October. Actually, I was supposed to make 4 videos in October. I wanted to make videos for, the scary season. And then what happened? What happened in the beginning of November that really just ruined my life and everyone else's life? What happened? After that, I just lost steam for a minute and I'm like, damn, am I really gonna do these scary videos? Because IRL kind of scary enough. I've ranted long enough and y'all aren't here for that. You're here to hear about Stagtown. So let's get into it. I'm going to give a full summary of the entire comic and then my review. If you want to skip to the review, go here. The summary will have spoilers because it is the entire story. This video is for readers. If you're the author of Stagtown or like an associate of the author, I need you to leave. I need you to turn back now. Well, also hello. Don't take my opinion too seriously. My opinion in this video is exaggerated for dramatic and vaguely comedic purposes. I wouldn't say it's constructive or worth listening. You should take all of my opinions with a grain of salt and read the comic for yourself. I'm just a random broke bitch on the internet. You're a successful author. Don't mind me. Our story opens up with Frankie, who is moving back into a small town she grew up in where nothing ever changes. Frankie had always known that she was going to come back to town for one reason or another, so she quickly settles into a small apartment with cheap rent. She lives a simple life, with the only real odd thing being her conspiracy theorist neighbor, Jeremy. I too have a crazy neighbor. Mine actually howls and barks at night. He revs his chainsaw for hours and he drags his shovel up and down his driveway. Yeah, it's odd having a potential serial killer as a neighbor. Luckily, Jeremy is mostly harmless. He tries to yap at Frankie about the cameras installed in the hallways, and she's like, girl, the cameras have always been there, okay? Jeremy also thinks that it is the Illuminati watching him, so you can't really blame Frankie for ignoring him. The next morning, she wakes up to enjoy a cup of coffee and notices a camera in her kitchen. Dun dun dun. Pointing right at her. So far, this was a very compelling first chapter. The author does a fantastic job of setting up the ambiance right away. Very quickly, Frankie was like, I ain't putting up with this shit, and leaves to go talk to the landlord. But as soon as she exits the building, she notices there are literally cameras everywhere. Just imagine them on every single street corner, on every building. Clearly, this is not just a Frankie problem. The cameras look very old and unappealing, but they've appeared all over town overnight with no one witnessing their installation. And naturally, of course, the traffic cameras in town malfunctioned the night before too. So the new cameras are virtually indestructible, and if you attempted to follow the cords from the cameras, you'd find they start becoming inaccessible fairly quickly, going under boulders or through walls. Obviously, Stagtown's population is upset. I think not upset enough. And the news advises them to just treat it like a prank and wait. The citizens adapt fairly quickly. They just start taking to walking with umbrellas everywhere or wearing masks. Like, these are adaptable people. Frankie cuts the camera in her kitchen down, immediately tossing it into the trash. However, the next morning, Frankie finds that the camera she threw away has been replaced by several new ones. Everyone in town learned the same lesson. If you try to cover up or tamper with a camera, a new camera will appear and it may even look like it could move. Basically, an even worse camera will take its place. Frankie begins taking her meals in her bedroom to avoid being watched, and she decides to stay in a motel out of town while everyone else sorts this out, and she's so real for that. First, she thinks to check on her conspiracy theorist neighbor. The one who was right about cameras watching everyone. Indeed, Jeremy is being watched very closely as there's dozens of cameras pointing at his door. Frankie knocks on Jeremy's door out of concern, but she only hears a sad meow. After not receiving a reply, Frankie comes back with the landlord. They unlock the door and are greeted by the sight of a horrifying, leggy camera attacking Jeremy's cat. Frankie thankfully saves the cat as they continue to look around the seemingly abandoned apartment. They find a fridge on the ground that is covered in mirrors and taped from the inside. They force it open only to get hit by a putrid smell and the sight of Jeremy's nearly dead body. At the hospital, Jeremy explains to Frankie Frankie that he kept disconnecting the cameras, causing them to multiply, and his mind began to lose it, like anyone would. He thought they couldn't reach him in the fridge box, but they did, and Jeremy claims he was tormented by the sound of many voices. Frankie's like, yeah, that's cool and all, but well, I'm leaving town to go stay at a motel, so... And Jeremy begs her to take him, to which she very reluctantly agrees. They decide to leave right away, but there is a crowd of people with masks guarding the tunnel outside of town, and the gang orders Frankie to get out of the car. This masked gang refuses to answer whether they're even police or not, so obviously they're not. They then accuse Frankie of trying to spread the cameras outside of town, which has her gagged and me gagged because these are cameras. They're not an infectious disease. The men manhandle her and Jeremy jumps out of the car to help, but a camera with legs lunges at Jeremy. Despite Frankie's protests, Jeremy destroys the camera, causes a gas container they had to combust in the same process, very unlucky, and then lit a flame. Jeremy jumps off the nearby bridge into the river below before Frankie can even reach him to help. So, yeah, he's dead. Frankie is extremely distraught, realizing she just witnessed a man die, and the camera that Jeremy beat has a cord that leads into the woods, which she points out to the masked gang. She's like, see, we didn't bring that camera. The guys decide to follow the cord, and Frankie, not knowing what else to do, joins them. Eventually, the cord gets tangled up in a mess of a bunch of other cords, and then they all lead to the town's graveyard. The one they're following goes directly into a coffin, which no one in the group has the guts to open, and they all go home. As a reader, on one hand, this is frustrating because I want to know what's inside the coffin. But on the other hand, it's refreshing and realistic because when watching horror movies, you're always like, bitch, why the fuck would you open that? Are you stupid? Are you dumb? And like Frankie is saying, no, not me, not today. The next day, all of the cameras in town shrivel as if they were organic and stop working. Only one camera remains, a harmless looking one that lingers in the vet clinic. Frankie passes by this very camera while she's taking Jeremy's cat to the vet, as Jeremy's body was never found and she's effectively adopted his cat. Several months go by fairly normally, and Frankie has started looking for a part-time job as a piano teacher. She gets an offer from an old foster care center on the other side of town. When Frankie arrives, she greets an old lady on the premises who's seen gardening, except like what the fuck is she actually doing? It's not gardening at all. That's not gardening. Like, hold up a second. So we have an old lady covering something in the front yard and a super creepy haunted looking house. Fantastic. Frankie learns the house is called the Marvale House, and it's run by Mrs. Davids, who thought piano lessons would be good for the children in there. The children are currently into creating marbles, important to note, hence they call it the Marble House. Frankie is warned in advance that the children have to wear masks for medical reasons. Of course, as she calls the children over, we see that the masks have to be terrifying for some reason. I'd leave. No hesitation. Sorry, little Timmy. You look like the serial killers from Pigpen. I'm out of here. I'm already in my car doing 70 miles per hour. Frankie, however, decides debt collectors are scarier than ghosts, and I do have to respect that. She stays and realizes pretty soon that the Marble kids are fairly normal except for their masks, and so 2 weeks go by peacefully. Until the third week, when Frankie is in her apartment late at night and someone knocks on her door. She goes to see who it is, but they're gone before she can catch them. And there's a letter addressed to her on the floor with a child's drawing inside. Frankie takes the drawing to the house in the morning to ask Mrs. Davids, like, hey, what the fuck? One of the kids came to my house late at night all the way across town. There's no way that they got there on foot. Mrs. Davids is clearly waving it off. She like, I don't give a fuck. Not even that she doesn't believe Frankie, but literally she just does not care. Mrs. Davids is obviously very suspicious, and we soon see the drawing looks clearly like it's depicting Jeremy's death. Frankie is confused, obviously, but never finds out which kid drew it. In the meantime, Frankie calls the landlord and asks, you said you were holding on to Jeremy's things. Can I look through them? Smart thinking, I get it. She goes back to the foster house to teach piano when one of the children starts scratching their neck and trying to reach up through the mask. And Frankie is really just waiting there with bated breath, but the kid takes it off and underneath the mask is a normal looking little girl. Frankie breathes a sigh of relief. What was I expecting? Then the child spits out a marble on the piano and Frankie's like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't put marbles in your mouth. That's dangerous." And so Frankie puts her hand out in a, "Okay, drop them" gesture. So the little girl spits out more marbles. Okay, how did you fit all those marbles? But then it just keeps going and going and going. And this child is spewing marbles. Frankie is screaming, "Oh my God, stop." She runs to find the old lady and shouts, "Call the hospital. The child is fucking vomiting marbles all over the place." She shakes Mrs. Davids and suddenly the old lady's hat falls off, only for a bunch of marbles to fall out. Frankie tries to run but slips and hits her head. Mrs. Davids stands, looking freaky as fuck, saying, "Frankie, I've lost my marbles. Can you help me?" Lady's got jokes. Frankie tries to run up to the front door, but she's super dizzy, clearly concussed. She makes it through the door only to be greeted by a dark room instead. There are children who aren't wearing masks, but they're chewing up rocks with their bare teeth. Their teeth are shattered and bleeding, and then they spit out a marble. The old lady monster starts to come down the stairs and continues calling for Frankie. Frankie is so me because she thinks, "Oh hell no, I'm getting the fuck out of here." You know, she's not like, "Oh my God, I have to take all 50,000 children with me on my way out." No, she's like, "I'm gone. Bye. Y'all can deal with this." Frankie wades through all the marbles to a tiny basement window, but it's glued shut. Remember, in the beginning when she first saw Mrs. Davids and she looked like she was gardening, you're like, "That bitch ain't gardening. What is she doing?" Well, this is what she was doing, gluing that window shut. Frankie's like, "Bitch, not today." And she grabs a rock to break the window. She crawls through it, bloodied, battered, and barely making it to her car. Hello, police. There's child abuse at this location. Y'all should check it out. So after making the anonymous report, Frankie goes home to tend to her wounds. And before you're like, "Oh my God, she just left the children there in that environment," really, what was she supposed to do? Because she couldn't tell the police that there's a marble monster. Let's be fucking for real. The next day, she discovers that the paper has an article about the house stating that it had fallen into an undiscovered sinkhole. A gas pipe burst, causing the house to also burn down. Everyone survived, allegedly being relocated out of town. But Frankie thinks, "I still have to move because the children still know where I live." And she sees a container of marbles and teeth left outside her door. Frankie gets down to business. Because of a misunderstanding that she's Jeremy's girlfriend, her landlord allows Frankie to relocate to a different, more remote apartment on the other side of town. And she even sets her up with a new car. Unfortunately, the police are not letting anyone go through Jeremy's things until some relatives show up to claim them. So Frankie comes up with a plan. She fully realizes now that Jeremy's death wasn't an accident, and he was the first person to notice something was wrong in town. Frankie manages to sneak her way into the storage area where Jeremy's things are held, and naturally, it is in a very old, very creepy building. Normally, the electricity here is on a timer to conserve energy. Frankie sets the timer, which means that she has 5 minutes to find Jeremy's storage unit and go through his stuff before the lights shut off. And then she would have to constantly get up and reset the timer, making the whole process take hours longer than it should. She doesn't find much, just a black box that has a lock on it, which she decides to stash away for later, and another shoebox that has tape all over it. Curious, she cuts the tape, but then the lights go out. Frankie tries to turn the lights back on, but it instantly goes out again. She gets up to fix it, and the same thing happens. Meanwhile, the shoebox has a red glowing light coming out from it. It seems empty now, except for some dirt, but the vibes are off, and Frankie starts to hear a scratching noise. She decides to run and get her bag to leave, so she breaks the timer, leaving it stuck on the on position by using her pocket knife. Frankie runs to grab her things and the box she set aside, while her knife flies out of the timer and lands on the floor farther away. But our girl Frankie is not an idiot, and she decides she doesn't need her knife that badly. At home, she picks the lock lock on the black box. Inside, there's a diary that had Frankie's name with hearts, making it clear that Jeremy was in love with her. She's not very into the idea, very, disgusted by it. She also finds a notebook, some newspaper clippings, and a piece of an article about the town's carousel. Frankie goes to the carousel, which is the town's old tourist attraction. The carousel itself was actually torn down years ago, but people still called the big open field that it was in the carousel. She tries to go through the field with a metal detector to see if she can find anything, with unfortunately no results. Frankie realizes she has to think more like Jeremy and be more research-minded. This results in a trip to the town library. The librarian helps her and gives her a bunch of lore about the town. Stagtown actually had an even older carousel than the one we've been talking about so far, but there are only a few written records of it and no photos. At some point, there was a wealthy person who built the old carousel, but not much else is known. However, all that is left of it now is a deer statue that used to be positioned at the very top. Frankie wonders, if this thing was so special, why did they tear it down? And the librarian answers, we don't quite know. Frankie thanks the lady for helping her and leaves. After a while, she finds out that Jeremy had been in the same room looking for information on the carousel a few months before. Frankie is nervous to be following in Jeremy's footsteps because he fucking died, but she's not sure it's a good idea to leave town right now, as she doesn't really have anyone that would take her in anywhere else. She doesn't have enough credit to rent an apartment outside of town, and she would have to use credit card debt to stay in a motel for a couple of months. She also thinks that since the creepy marble kids are out of town, maybe it's safer for her in town. Famous last words. But she does consider her first dumbass act. She goes back to the field at night, the carousel field. When she pulls up, it looks like there are a ton of shadows. She turns on her headlights to figure out what the shadows are, and it is a bunch of deer staring at her with glowing eyes. Frankie immediately drives back home and throws 34 cents in a jar, telling her cat that they are moving out once this jar is full. We get a flashback of a time that Frankie had come into the apartment and helped Jeremy carry some packages to his door. It seems like he wanted to say something to her, but then he chickened out. Then we see someone receive an email, and they seem to know Jeremy. This is in the present. This chapter ends with the carousel animals narrating about music and how we will all be one together. Very creepy. The me that was taking notes was reading this at 3:30 a.m. in the dark alone. Not anymore. I'm done. This is a daytime comic, so we not reading it anymore at 3 a.m. alone in a room. Frankie goes through Jeremy's notes and finds a sketch of a town bridge. All other leads are drying up as Jeremy went to great lengths to encode his notes. She drives to the bridge from the sketch and it's obviously abandoned, very creepy, with some dead birds and a path that leads to the woods. She follows the path and stumbles upon an old, rickety, dilapidated house that has most of the accessible windows boarded up except one on the ground level. I really love that Frankie isn't a fucking idiot because she decides to come back the next day after packing some supplies. She brings a backpack full of water, snacks, rope, etc. She goes through the abandoned house and sees a cellar. It's quite obvious that Jeremy went through this cellar and came out alive, so she decides if he did, she can too. She tweets her location, ties the lid of the cellar to keep it open, and decides to go down the ladder halfway. If it's safe, then she'll come back the next day with lanterns and more materials. Unfortunately for Frankie though, despite her grand preparation, the ladder breaks down halfway and the rope snaps, shutting the lid. Frankie, of course, has no phone signal down in the cellar and no real way to get back up. The cellar is pretty sturdy and empty, except for, of course, a tiny vent with a slight draft of air coming from it. She waits for a few hours to see if she can get reception, which obviously doesn't happen. With no other options, Frankie goes through the vent with a spool of thread in case there are twists and turns so she can find her way back. She's smarter than me. The path ends up being very long. She decides she should head back to the beginning. Alas, as she gets close to the end of the thread, she finds that the vent is closed and the spool of thread and nail have been moved to inside of the vent with her. The only option option now is to move forward. Hours and hours pass. Voices start to plague her, and Frankie has the sickening feeling that whatever's doing this wants to see her break down. She keeps crawling, only to finally reach the end of the tunnel, and it's just a dirt wall. Frankie scratches and breaks through the wall, finding slivers of light peeking through from the other side. She bursts through the dirt, feeling triumphant, only to end up back in front of the vent. Frankie starts to truly have a mental breakdown, and she thinks, this is it, I'm going to die. After what feels like days, she sees a small glimmer of light. Approaching it cautiously, it's revealed to be Jeremy's UFO keychain. Jeremy was down here. He went into the vent, got trapped, and had to get out. Frankie is reminded again that she has to think more like Jeremy. With great reluctance, she crawls back into the vent, but this time with the intention of finding a secret passage. Knock on the floor, the wall, and the ceiling. Every step. Crawl. Floor, wall, ceiling. Finally, there's a hidden panel that clicks in and has a J inscribed on it. A small aside. I want to mention that the author of this comic had an active Discord where people were giving their theories and ideas. Overall, the author seems to be very interactive in the community, which I think is extremely nice to see, and I don't know, I just appreciate it, even though I wasn't around for all that. Frankie traverses this new, significantly more difficult tunnel until it leads to a little dark room with a deer skull on a spike. Approaching it, Frankie steps in some unknown black sticky gunk, and then she sees in the walls there's some sort of ledge and handmade footholds that Jeremy clearly carved out. She regrets not talking to Jeremy more. The fact that he went through all of this alone while everyone thought he was crazy. She makes her way to the top and bursts through an open field. Frankie thinks to herself, it's time to leave this fucking town right now. Frankie runs home, grabs a few things and the cat, and starts zooming out of town. Remember, there's only one tunnel to drive out of, and no one is guarding it this time. But she feels like she's forgetting something really important. And then she remembers, the UFO she found is from Jeremy's car keys. If Jeremy had a car, why did he ask her to drive him out of town? She starts to feel wrong and realizes she's done this before. She's tried to leave town, not once, many times. The exit of the tunnel suddenly turns into an eye and a mouth, and Frankie freaks out, and then boom, she's out of the tunnel, on the side of the road, in her car, wondering how she got there. It's like some sort of programming zaps her brain, and the cat is hissing, so mad, so mad. But Frankie just turns to it and asks how its trip to the vet was, before driving home. At the beginning of the next chapter, Frankie seems happy. She's narrating that she recently moved back to her hometown. Nothing ever happens. It's pretty boring here. She notices she has a moving fund and wonders, what's that about? But then she thinks, oh, it must be left over from when I moved back here. The cat is angry, okay? The cat is not having it with her. The cat's like, bro, you've thrown me in that kennel too many times. Later on, when Frankie is in her car hanging out, some random ass man knocks on the window. He asks if she's Frankie Parker. She's like, what's it to you, bud? She starts to drive off, but he says, wait, I just need to know if you've seen this symbol before. And he pulls out a piece of paper with a symbol, an eye with deer horns. When Frankie sees it, clearly something switches in her brain and she starts just screaming, begging for it to stop. She wakes up in a random man's apartment, the same random man who showed her the paper. Frankie's freaked out, but he calms her down and tells her that he brought her here after she passed out because he didn't know where else to take her. He doesn't know where she lives. He's a friend of Jeremy's. He apologizes for causing her episode, explaining that Jeremy instructed him to show her that symbol. So they sit down and talk. Frankie now knows that she's missing memories of things that have happened, although she can't really tell what. And she knows she's tried to leave town. This friend of Jeremy's, Felix, explains that he got an email from Jeremy when Jeremy died. When he got the email, he printed it out. And then for some reason, he got another email from the wrong address. But after that, he deleted Jeremy's email and threw the printout in the trash. He'd forgotten about all of this until recently when he was going through his trash and saw the printout. The printout included the symbol, and after seeing this, he got a really bad headache and started to remember how he had previously deleted everything. Apparently, the email that was sent to him was a dead man's switch, activated should something happen to Jeremy. The email included instructions to also show Frankie. So clearly Jeremy wanted them to team up and he didn't want to leave them completely defenseless. They had a scary thought too. Perhaps it wasn't that nobody ever listened to Jeremy's conspiracy ramblings, but maybe they were made to forget. They realized together how lonely he must have been. Jeremy had also gotten that eye symbol tattooed on his body by Felix. Just like Frankie, Felix had also tried to leave town before to no avail. Frankie thinks maybe they should just try to get outside help to rescue them. Felix tells her that he can't access phone numbers from outside town. He can access the whole internet, but he can't comment on anything. They are completely shut off. The two agree to be partners in figuring out what the hell is going on. So they start by going through Jeremy's notes back at Frankie's apartment, where Felix teases her about the hearts with her name in them. Felix shows Frankie that he has temporary tattoos of the eye symbol, enough for every day for a while for both of them. He puts one on her. I don't know, because if it were me, I would just get a permanent tattoo. The two decide to leave town through the train station. Frankie thinks since they don't know if something will happen to them, it's safer to leave the cat at the long-term boarding offered at the vet clinic than to take the cat with them on their uncertain journey. And just to let you know, the cat's name is Little Friend. They're packed and ready when they arrive at the train station, but it turns out that the train station is dilapidated and clearly unoperated, even though according to the website, it's supposed to be running 5 trains a day. They notice that the next stop is 10 miles from where they currently are, so they begin a trek across the train tracks. Eventually, the train tracks start to get worse, with the rails disappearing. Frankie is freaking out, but Felix calms her down. Sorry, y'all, I hate to tell you. I hate to say it, but I am that bitch. I am that bitch, and I ship things. It may not be the time for romance, but I don't care. I'm letting y'all know that I am the problem. I'm the reason why there is a romantic subplot in everything. It is my fault. You may send complaints to my email where my manager will read it. However, I will not be accepting any counter arguments at this time. They keep walking while the tracks start to get buried beneath the dirt until eventually the tracks lead underground. Right before that, Frankie picks up a marble. The two decide they are not stupid enough to go down into the hole, so they sit down and eat lunch. I love all of Felix's nicknames for Frankie. Fantastic. I mean, come on. She tells him that she's afraid the marble children never left town and maybe they just went underground. She realizes suddenly that all the places where strange things have happened have all had something to do with underground. The cameras, cables, the marble house, the kids were digging underground, and the abandoned farmhouse had a cellar underground. She doesn't want to tell Felix exactly about what happened in the cellar since it traumatized her, and they get into a minor argument while some black tar starts to bubble up from the giant gaping hole in the train tracks. Out from the tar emerges a camera with extremely sharp legs. It immediately charges at them. The two take off running, making a mad dash back to the previous train station. It's only later that Frankie realizes the creature felt like it was hurting them because it never actually attacked. They drive frantically back to Frankie's apartment as she remembers that the camera has a 5 inscribed on it. What else had a 5 inscribed on it? The box full of dirt from the storage room, Jeremy's storage room, the one that had something come out of it. Since that day, Felix had started living at Frankie's apartment, and they never really talked about this change, but it's clear that both of them are afraid of being separated in case something happens. Felix feels extremely guilty, believing he wasn't a good enough friend to Jeremy because he didn't listen to him, and that he has to make up for it by saving Jeremy's girl. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Felix plans to try one of the other ways out of town by himself. He doesn't want to tell Frankie because he knows she's traumatized by the cellar and the feeling of going in circles. While it's nice to see his point of view, I wish he wouldn't do this because it's obviously stupid. He heads to an old bridge that resembles a wooden tunnel, thinking he needs to walk through it. As he walks, he can see the other side, but it's frustratingly far away. Meanwhile, he's being stalked quietly by a bloody camera with legs. When it jumps out at him, Felix barely dodges it, but the camera still gets him. He tries to run back, but the tunnel stretches on and on and on endlessly. The camera catches up to him and Felix crashes to the ground, looking lifeless. At the same time, Frankie wakes up to find Felix is gone. She feels betrayed and saddened. He just disappeared, not answering her calls either. Feeling extremely lonely, especially after finally having someone to confide in, she calls Felix one last time and she hears ringing. It's coming closer and closer, right up to her door. She looks through the peephole and sees Felix, but something seems off. He's just standing there knocking, and when she goes to unlock the door, her cat starts hissing. The figure outside tells her to let him in. "Let me in, Frankie." Felix sounds wrong, almost drunk, and Frankie feels uneasy and refuses to let him back in. They argue back and forth for a while until Felix eventually walks away. Sometime later, the real Felix wakes up on the ground floor of Frankie's apartment building. He rushes over to her apartment, realizing she's been alone all this time, only to be horrified at the sight of a barren wall where Frankie's door once was. We get a flashback of Felix and Jeremy hanging out. Jeremy is talking about something vanishing, while Felix is making sandwiches. Felix is, it's in one ear and it's out the other. Felix advises Jeremy to talk to someone, and Jeremy, clearly depressed, responds, "I'm talking to you right now." Felix urges him to see a professional, and they share a bittersweet laugh. They go a long time without hanging out again. Felix comes by months later to leave lasagna at Jeremy's doorstep. My friends don't leave lasagna at my doorstep. This is a call out. Back in the present, Felix is panicking. How the hell is Frankie's apartment just gone? The logo for each chapter is really cool. I appreciate that each arc gets its own relevant logo. Anyway, Felix frantically tries to ask neighbors about Frankie's missing apartment, but they either don't remember or just straight up don't answer. It feels like the wall is made of something harder than cement, something that won't budge with just a sledgehammer. He even thinks of making a homemade bomb, but that might take the ceiling down right on Frankie's head. So Felix disguises himself as a repairman and breaks into one of the neighboring apartments. Felix attempts to drill through the neighbor's wall. When this doesn't work, he hesitates to just start knocking down potentially a load-bearing wall. Panic and feelings of inadequacy begin to set in as he worries that Frankie might be dead. In the distance, he notices some black gooey tar bubbling ominously in the grass. Meanwhile, from Frankie's perspective, she went to sleep after the argument with the fake Felix. When she wakes up, she finds her front door, all her windows, and her balcony have vanished. Desperate, she tries to break down the walls, fails. A panic attack sets in as she recalls the cellar, but her cat, little friend, comes over to comfort her. She tries to think of what supplies she has, but suddenly her bedroom disappears. Being the resourceful person she is, Frankie heads to the kitchen and starts dividing up all of her food and cat food among the remaining rooms. After taking a brief nap, she wakes up to find the living room is gone. Frantically, she wonders what would have happened if she was in there. Feeling vulnerable, Frankie decides to move to the bathroom, thinking it's safer since it has plumbing, at least. She calls for little friend, but the cat doesn't arrive in time. A wall suddenly shuts, trapping her in the bathroom. Terrified, she sees a shape forming on the door and the walls, resembling a person screaming. Black tar begins dripping from the ceiling, accompanied by a voice pleading for help. Above her, she sees a deer-shaped tar monster looming menacingly. Meanwhile, Felix is trying to piece things together. He recalls waking up in the basement of Frankie's apartment and runs back there, noticing a large hole someone made with a sledgehammer. He spots a black tar root-like thing going into the water pipe. Suddenly, it clicks. When he was attacked in the tunnel, something must have taken over him, allowing this tar entity to invade the apartment. With newfound urgency, he grabs a sledgehammer and races back to Frankie's apartment. When he arrives, he sees where her door used to be and just smashes it in. As he crashes through, he feels pain shoot through his foot. It's bleeding and hurting, realizing it was all an illusion cast by the black tar. He rushes inside outside to find Frankie sobbing on the bathroom floor. He cradles her in his arms, reassuring her that everything is okay and none of it was real. They both cry together, finding solace in each other's presence. Deciding to relocate for now to Felix's apartment, they begin to discuss the ordeal. Frankie clearly shows signs of PTSD. She can't stand when Felix leaves her alone, even to go to the bathroom. They theorize about the situation, recalling how the tar was in the water supply and also in the needle that the camera had poked Felix with, suggesting it has some sort of mind control properties and also illusion properties. Frankie had drunk tap water right before bed, and when she woke up, that's when the doors started disappearing. They conclude that the entire town's water supply might be contaminated. Frankie is determined to understand why this is happening and what the entity wants from them. Felix, however, thinks it's better to just leave town instead of trying to reason with bathroom goo. Suddenly, they feel an earthquake-like tremor. Looking outside, they see a massive sinkhole forming. Time is definitely running out, and they realize this is a dire sign, especially since all of the bad things have been happening underground. So the giant sinkhole pops up and the town evacuates all the nearby buildings. The evacuated townspeople are put up in motels where Frankie and Felix share a room and continue to plan their escape. They decide to rule out hiking out of town, as if it were possible, Jeremy definitely would have done it already. The only way left is the river, though neither of them know how to operate a boat, but the pair buy supplies and a raft. While they're getting ready, they wonder what will happen when they leave town. Is this thing even only in their town? What if the rest of the world is like this? 2 more sinkholes appear, so the entire town is now being evacuated. How is that gonna go? Frankie decides to join everyone in line, because her thought is that the entity can't turn everyone back. Felix reluctantly agrees, but while they're in line, they quickly realize the cars are turning around. Someone tells the pair, the evacuations are over. The workers are telling everyone to go home. The sinkholes are gone. Felix immediately realizes that this is the brainwashing done by the town, and him and Frankie start tossing around the idea of leaving the eye symbol, that really scary eye symbol that protects them, all around town. They figure it's the right thing to do to warn everyone, and it also might give them the cover they need to leave. So they decide to get spray paint and they go crazy on the town, and then they'll leave tomorrow no matter what. The paint could get wiped away by malevolent forces, but at least they have to try to help everyone before leaving. Frankie and Felix share a moment of comforting each other, and Frankie also theorizes that maybe certain memories are constantly trying to break through because of the symbol. The more you look at it, the more it helps to lift that cloud of everything is normal. They wait in the Jeep, Felix's car, to see what happens in the morning, and they're woken up by the sound of a scream. As the early birds rise, more and more people start screaming until they pass out from exhaustion. Frankie and Felix head towards the river. On the way, they notice an accident in the road where they get out of the cars and then see the deer head on a spike shoots up from underground and starts screaming. The scream is so loud, it burns their tattoos, and the scream can be heard for miles. It is clearly reprogramming everyone again. Frankie and Felix are like, fuck this. They speed towards the river. And yes, as you can see, I attempted to have this symbol too. Yeah, it's not that good. I wanted it to look kind of like how theirs were burned into their skin, but I'm not a special effects artist. I just had eyeshadow in a dream. Anyway, so Frankie and Felix are like, fuck this. They speed towards the river. They put on their life jackets and they take out their supplies. They take little friend out and they put a life vest on her too, and everything seems to be going surprisingly well. But after a while, little friend starts hissing at something. They're almost up to the bridge and they feel like once they pass the bridge, it's all over. Felix is getting excited while Frankie is still wary and little friend is hissing her butt off. Something rustles in the nearby bushes. It turns out to be the same camera that beat Felix's ass. The camera lunges at the raft on top of Felix, who yells at Frankie to hit it off of him. But Frankie is standing frozen, so little friend takes it upon herself to tackle the camera. The camera and little friend both fall into the water as the camera's sharp edges puncture the raft. Felix jumps into the water to save little friend, and he luckily gets her. Bitch, I would drop this comic right here if little friend died. Like, it would be over. over. The video ends, but we're good for now. The boat sinks, causing Frankie to fall in the water too, except she's separated from Felix. Frankie is getting lost in the current. Felix is like, not on my watch, and he puts little friend on some rocks out of the water and tells her that he'll be back, but he has to go save Frankie. He swims over to her, but she can't reach him. Felix grabs her and something catches Frankie by the leg as they're being pulled towards a little cave. Felix is like, bitch, we cannot go in there. Grab anything because that's an underground river. They try their hardest to grab the cavern walls as they crumble, and the pair get taken into the cave. They get dragged by the current as the walls get tighter and the ceiling gets lower and lower. The author is in the comments talking about how they took a tour somewhere for research on underground rivers, and I think that research shows. I really appreciate the effort they put into this. It is very obvious. After being forced underwater, the pair wake up on a very small plot of rocky terrain. Felix is like, well, we're really lucky. But Frankie is not having it. She starts to have a mental breakdown. She starts going off on Felix, and he's like, why are you going off on me? I'm just trying to be positive about it. I'm just trying to get us through this. And she admits that she feels like everything is her fault. She let the camera monster out when she went into the storage room. She released the totem deer head in the cellar. She feels like everything she's done has only made things worse, and that she would be better off still being in her apartment right now. She thinks if she had not driven to leave town, Jeremy would still be alive. Felix says, you trying your best is not you being at fault for everything. He admits that he's also made some mistakes. He never should have left her alone and gone through that tunnel by himself. He also never should have gotten them an inflatable raft. She feels better after this, and their friendship is so sweet, and I'm okay if they don't get together. I just think they're wonderful. Felix pulls out some snacks, and he's like, guess what else I have? I can't light the flare gun, but guess what? It comes with spare matches. So he pulls out the flare gun and matches. He lights a match, and Frankie notices a draft blowing, so she uses Jeremy's UFO keychain to find a tiny hole. Survival mode is on, so our girl is not worried about the claustrophobia. They just go through the tiny tunnel together, and eventually it opens up into a dark passage where they hear a carousel. I also want to mention that I think Frankie pointing out that everything she's done has just led them to this point. It's not a matter of her making mistakes, in my opinion. It seems purposeful. Like whatever entity is doing this to them has been guiding her to this point. Anyway, so they have no choice but to move towards the carousel music. And of course, this chapter has audio. The audio is expertly done at building tension. It's just really good. I recommend having audio on and checking it out. And I gotta be honest, y'all, I don't usually like audio in my webtoons. I feel like it makes it feel very disjointed and it doesn't usually tie things together for me, but in this case, they did a bang up job. So they see a dilapidated carousel in the middle of the black tar pit, and Frankie is like, this is what you brought us out here for, right? You brought us here. You made us take the river. You pushed that current to take us into this underground tunnel. You did all this for what? Just for us to see this shit? The deer head on the carousel snaps and says, fix us. Fix us. A tunnel inside the tar pit opens up. Frankie curses them out, saying the entity will not coerce them with fear after killing their friend. But the tar pit continues to surround them, and Felix says, I don't think they're asking anymore. They have nowhere to go except down. The pair staunchly refuse and look for a way out. After Felix lights the flare, they notice immediately that the tar is afraid of fire. They see a tiny crack in the wall leading to a little space, and they run for it. They block the entrance using the flare and their own clothes. The two come to the conclusion there's no way out of this room, so they sit down and have a little moment. Then, behind a bookshelf, there's more tar peeking out. Frankie is like, I have a weird hunch about it. Let's move the bookshelf. So Felix is like, okay, you're crazy, but let's do it. They move the bookshelf to reveal another passage leading to a room where they see the body of Jeremy. Felix instantly checks for signs of life, while Frankie wonders how they know if this is even really Jeremy. This enrages Felix, and Frankie apologizes but firmly states she watched him die by falling into the river after being lit on fire. How did he survive that? How did he live down here? Felix argues that he will not leave Jeremy behind, so Frankie suggests they check his tattoo. It looks scarred over in a different and worse way than theirs, which convinces Frankie. She has Felix carry Jeremy while running ahead as she holds off the tar from the rear. They keep running as Frankie realizes they're in a mine shaft, meaning there's definitely a way up. She guides them to where she thinks the way up is, where they ultimately find a ladder. Felix climbs the ladder carrying Jeremy, and Frankie is behind him. The ladder breaks at the last second and Frankie falls, but Felix luckily manages to catch her. Once they get pulled up onto the surface, they light another flare to throw it down the shaft, setting it on fire and creating an explosion. This teaches us that the black tar is extremely flammable. The trio get back to the Jeep where they gratefully find little friend. Of course, Jeremy is still knocked out as they load him up into the car. Frankie narrates and thinks, I don't know what all this is. I don't know what it's preparing us for, or what our life is going to be like from here on out. But I know I'm not accepting this. And I know that thing did not intend for us to survive what was down there. She says she's not going to be the one. She knows where that thing lives now, and it needs to watch its back. Okay, queen. The season finale is from Jeremy's point of view, and it's actually voice acted, which is so surprising. It really did add to it. I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps even just mentioning it. I've never seen a voice acted chapter on Webtoon. So Jeremy remembers the first time he met Frankie. She was fun, a little weird, surprisingly similar to him, and they seemed to have a lot of fun hanging out together. She looked like a pretty active participant in some of his theories and journeys. She's the one who gave him the UFO keychain. But one day, Frankie comes back home, and she doesn't know who Jeremy is. He is freaked out, and yet he knows she's not lying, so he tries to show her his notes, making her just think he's crazy. So he tries to show her a photo of them together, but for some reason, the entity zaps both of them. He stomps on his own phone and is like, sorry, I don't know what I was doing. Jeremy forgets everything for a while, living in an ignorant peace until he's doing research and comes across a symbol. It makes him remember everything violently. Now that he's remembered everything, he tries to show Frankie the symbol, but it looks like all it did was take off the top layer of fake memories. It didn't go back to when she and Jeremy knew each other. It just went back to when she first moved into the building. Now, we know when the story began and Frankie was talking about how she just moved into this building, that was just one of the times her memory was reset. Jeremy decides he can't keep doing this to her. He doesn't even know what long-lasting effect this may have on her brain, so he leaves her alone. They continue to be strangers. Eventually, Jeremy doesn't want to even confide in Felix because he's afraid that Felix will forget him too, and that's the only person left who remembers him. The town has taken everyone else, every other friend and family member he has. Everyone's forgotten him, and now everyone just thinks he's some crazy guy. He sees little friend under a dumpster when he's just so lonely. He picks up the cat and notices that it seems like animals aren't susceptible to whatever brainwashing is going on, so at least little friend won't forget him. It was a fantastic season finale. Not gonna lie to you. There's cute little comics between this season and the next. We learned that the author uses handmade paper models for reference. I just respect this creator so much. It's extremely clear that this is a huge labor of love. The paper models are amazing. I'm in shock at how much effort goes into this comic. There's also an in-between comic about how Jeremy and Felix met, which was cute. They met because Felix basically made Jeremy go to the gym. And then there's a more important comic about how little friend escaped from the rock she was stuck on in the river. Littles just ran along some rocks to get out of the river, climbed up, and started heading back to where the car was. Then the monster started to chase Littles. Littles climbed up some rocks, and the monster was climbing up behind her. A rock started crumbling and fell on the camera monster, and little friend is like, yeah, bitch, I fucked that guy up. And then we're back at the Jeep. The new season starts with Frankie telling us what's been happening. Everyone has moved into Frankie's apartment since Felix's place was destroyed. They don't trust any town doctors to take care of Jeremy, so they've been looking after him around the clock. Felix has been pushing himself to do almost all of the work to make up for his guilt, and they buy bottled water for everything. Frankie is running low on money. They have almost nothing left. Jeremy sleeps on the bed and eventually wakes up, but he can't talk and he cries if anyone ever leaves him alone. He's eventually able to talk a little bit, and it definitely seems like that was a very sweet moment between everyone. The stress is getting to Frankie and Felix, and they end up fighting over nothing. Gradually, everyone is starting to settle into a somewhat normal routine, but there's this cloud hanging over them. They just feel like they're waiting for something bad to happen because they know that that thing isn't dead. They're running out of money with only a month or two left of rent money. Frankie and Felix continue bickering, but Jeremy seems to find it a little endearing, and honestly, the four of them make a very cute found family. After a while, Jeremy's ready to talk about it a little. He doesn't want to discuss what happened underground yet. It seems that part was too traumatizing. But he talks about how he survived because Frankie says, "I watched you burn." And Jeremy responds, "That's interesting. I didn't know that's what they showed you." So we see what happened from Jeremy's point of view. Frankie went to the tunnel and they were stopped by those guys in masks. The guys grabbed Frankie and Jeremy got out of the car. Then a camera came out and another camera followed. The second camera flashed a really bright light at everyone. Jeremy covered his eyes, but his tattoo started burning while Frankie and the guys looked directly at the bright light, which seemed to be showing them something. Not real. Jeremy then gets grabbed by some black cables that pull him off the bridge and into the river. When the projection stops, everyone is like, "Holy shit, that guy, we saw him. He was on fire. He went over the bridge." And Jeremy says that the thing tried to offer him a deal, asking him to fix it, whatever that means. It was the same thing it asked Frankie and Felix. He refused, so it kept him down there, maybe as a backup plan or for punishment, and Jeremy constantly heard voices. He sensed countless people being trapped in the tar. He also said he tried to reach out and talk to Frankie, which definitely shows that some of the stuff that had happened was regular people trying to reach out, like maybe the screaming faces in Frankie's walls when her house started closing in on her. Frankie and Felix show Jeremy his notes that they attempted to decode, so Jeremy explains he had to make it very difficult to read so the entity wouldn't learn what he's writing. A lot of his notes are about a person named Nova, who was a town resident back in the 70s into the 2000s. Nova is just an alias he gave them because he doesn't know their real name. Jeremy believes Nova created the eye protection symbol. He doesn't know what happened to them or where they are now, if they're still alive even, but he knows that Nova was also trapped in the town. And he thinks that Nova may have inadvertently taught the entity about cameras. Jeremy feels that maybe he taught it about computers by accident. He says it learns by watching them, and it's very smart, but it's not good with numbers. Jeremy senses Frankie's guilt, so he reassures her that there was nothing she could have done to save him. He later tells little friend that he thinks he just needs to earn Frankie's friendship a second time because she's been through so much. He doesn't want to add to her burden by letting her know just how often her memory has been wiped, and at the end of the chapter, we see some fingers come up from the ground in front of the apartment complex. Jeremy starts feeling better, so he's able to approach the others to let them know he heard them arguing about money. But it turns out Jeremy's actually fucking rich. So he's like, "Yeah, we don't have to stress about this. I want to help out too." He asks Felix to go get him some clothes. He doesn't want to continue just wearing Felix's clothes, and he can't go wander around town himself since he's supposedly dead. Felix goes, and my boy Felix raised his own death flag here. He really, really did. Before leaving, he says, "Love you, bro. Love you, Fran. Love you, Kat." And Frankie protests, "You don't have to say that every time you leave." And Felix retorts, "Yeah, I do. Just in case I can't later." While he's out, he sits on a bench and starts texting Frankie a really amazing shirt that he apparently bought for Jeremy. We see some feet walking up to Felix. It's not just us that see the feet though. Felix sees it too. He's trembling now. Something seems like it's trying to communicate with him, maybe inside his head. He starts begging for it to just leave. Everything's finally working out. Please just go. When he opens his eyes, it's gone. Felix again texts the others, "You know I love you guys." And Frankie's like, "Bro, you just said this 2 hours ago." And he says, "Well, just in case." Now, all the symbols that this creature was saying to Felix, apparently this is in code. In the comments of the comic, they're smarter than I am, so they decoded it. Let's see what the top comment is saying. It says, "Still here, can't kill us, go down the stairs. This isn't over, see you soon." Ever since then, Felix has been very paranoid. He refuses to tell the others why, but he insists on setting up better security for their apartment. They've moved into a new 2-bedroom unit. Felix further insists that everyone moves together from now on. He even got a backpack with a bubble window for little friend, which Frankie and Jeremy obviously think is a little weird, a little overkill. Jeremy informs everyone that he has another storage unit, one that he was paying for outside of his apartment. They all go together to the unit. As they're driving, they almost hit a man who walks into the middle of the road. They abruptly stop the car, only for the man to pull a gun on them. Jeremy gets out of the car and he's like, "Bobby, I know that's not a real gun. Put it away." I don't know why Jeremy sounds like that right now. Fran and Felix are freaked out and Bobby wonders how Jeremy is still alive, but Jeremy just tells Bobby that he had to unplug for a while. Bobby turns out to be a big conspiracy guy too. They try to warn him not to drink the tap water and Bobby is like, "Duh, I know that the government puts chemicals in the water to make you vote liberal." Frankie indulges Jeremy in a conversation about a cross between Bigfoot and a jackalope. Jeremy's so excited and it's very cute. They notice a homemade bed in the corner of the shed that Jeremy rented. And Jeremy's like, "That ain't mine. So it looks like we need to get out of here and load up the Jeep." On the back of the shed, we see handprints. The group set up a closed security system at home while Frankie and Felix explain what they've learned to Jeremy. They learned that the underground tunnel was an abandoned mine shaft owned by Hartwell Iron Company or something. Everyone agrees to research this more at the library. At the library, the gang looks through things to find information. Felix drops a book when he gets a sudden splitting headache, and as he goes to pick it up, he sees feet on the other side of the aisle. Felix bolts back to the others, rushes them to throw the books in the bag, and forces them out without explaining why. That was all very stressful, but I would like to point out that Jeremy's disguise for the library was really, really good. It's so fucking conspicuous that it's just perfect. I knew that Felix had a weeaboo phase when he called Frankie Franson once. Still, this was an unexpected disguise. Back at the home base, they discovered Nova's notes may have belonged to the library because the box says for staff use only. We also learned that Jeremy used to work at the Marble House as a handyman. He did some work for them, but he never learned anything special despite a gut feeling that something was very wrong there. The kids back then weren't wearing animal masks, they just wore plain surgical masks. Sudden beeping from the security system interrupts them. Felix looks, and it's like there's nothing at first, but then if he zooms in, he can see the very corner of one frame right outside their door. Creepy toes. Felix tries to assure the others that everything is okay, which is odd because he grabs a bat to take a look outside by himself. It's obvious that a breakdown is coming for him. He's experiencing extreme inner turmoil, unsure if he's going crazy or if something is actually wrong. Despite common sense saying otherwise, Felix feels unable to tell the others about what's happening. Instead, he convinces himself he doesn't want to worry them. He also definitely got some more cryptic words said to him in this chapter, and in the comments they decoded it, and it says, "Still here, Felix." As Felix patrols the apartment complex, Frankie sits Jeremy down to talk. She declares something is obviously wrong with Felix, and she needs Jeremy to back her up on this so they can get Felix to confess what's wrong. Jeremy is stung with guilt at the mention of hiding something, as he's yet to tell Frankie that they used to be close friends. He also expresses a very slight bit of jealousy over Frankie's concern towards Felix, but she doesn't pick up on it. Instead, she proclaims that both men have been pillars for her. She appreciates both of them deeply. But on the other side of this, Felix sits at a bench berating himself for not telling the others something is wrong with him. He fears being kicked out or purposely left out of the loop, and then a noise, footsteps. Footprints start rapidly appearing on the sidewalk, rushing for Felix. He barely makes it back to the apartment before it slams on the door behind him, saying, "Nowhere to run. You can't hide. We're already inside you." The next chapter is a letter addressed to someone named Samuel, and it's from some bitch named Charles, who is writing about how fucking sick his life is now that he lives in a small town, where people of all types, Protestants and Catholics, can get along without crazy politics. Everything is serene and full of nature. Charles is fixing a new estate for his family after recently coming back from a voyage. This estate is known in the present to us as the Marble House. Charles discusses how everyone in town is basically broke bitches, and his family has to kind of dress down to assimilate. They don't want the people in town to think they're bougie. He also lets the poor bitches from town hunt on his property because he's like, I don't need that shit, y'all broke. Feeling grateful at the townspeople for accepting his family, Charles decides to throw a big ass party. So obviously he invites Sam to this party too, and he's like, bring your wife, bring your kids. You know, my kids want to see their cousins or whatever. letter. Charles concludes the later half of the letter by bragging about some amazing shit he saw in France, some seated flying horses that went in a circle. He's inspired to bring it to his new town to flex on the hoes. We can conclude that Charles is the dumbass who apparently brought the carousel to town. This letter seems very well researched, like it was a pain to read. I felt like I was reading the Scarlet Letter. I think the author definitely did their research on the annoying ass way people talked back then, and my brain just immediately starts to shut off. I am barely literate on modern English, let alone this fancy gobbledygook. In the present, Jeremy tells Frankie about Operation Ark, in which he sent 7 different boxes out to some conspiracy friends. The boxes include information he wasn't able to decode himself, hoping one of the others could do it. He put a lot of fail-safes in place, and so it's very possible that on the internet right now, in his email, there might be some responses from people that give more information about Nova's notes. Frankie and Jeremy want to read the email, but they don't have internet access at this time. There's also the fear of the town entity catching them attempting to access the internet. It may then shut off their phones entirely, preventing them from calling one another. The plan is very simple. Go into the library at night really fast to check Jeremy's email before the town entity notices anything. Felix barrels inside the apartment, rushing to get to the bathroom and slamming the doors behind him. Jeremy tries to ask what's wrong, and as Felix attempts to answer, he's struck by the memory of the camera monster injecting him in the tunnel after beating his ass. His neck starts to look nasty, and Felix answers that everything is fine in a dead voice. Frankie is sleeping in her room that night when Felix opens her door. Slowly, he walks in with a bat. He stands over her. Little friend starts hissing, and it seems like that takes Felix out of his trance for a moment. He wonders what he was doing as he leaves her room. Jeremy catches him in the hallway holding the bat. He asks Felix what he's doing, but Felix can only say, "I don't know." Frankie and Jeremy decide not to tell Felix the real reason they're going to the library, instead lying that they just want to do some general research. They go at night for their plan to avoid any mind-controlled townspeople who might be working at the library. Jeremy has a flashback to him and Frankie breaking into a building together, and it looks like she used to call him Jojo. I got a Jojo, he's a sleepy boy. At a computer, Felix questions what they're really doing, but the power goes out. Frankie urges them to leave before something comes, and wouldn't you know it, footsteps start to approach. The gang runs into a room on the 2nd story. Frantically, they try to plan how to escape. Felix is looking rough, saying he's not feeling good over and over. He prepares him and Frankie to jump out the window, but Jeremy is distracted by the sight of a laptop. Against Frankie's warnings, Jeremy approaches the laptop to open up his email. The others urge Jeremy to leave. As something slams the door open, a black fog enters the room. Felix screams, "Make it stop!" Something in his head whispers, "The others lied to him. Don't trust them. Not safe. Get rid of them, Felix." There's an entity comprised of a face and arms in the corner of the room, different from the other entity we've seen following Felix thus far. However, Felix springs into action, pushes the others behind him, grabs a chair, and begins fighting the arms and legs entity. Frankie yells that there's nothing there, attempting to stop Felix. The laptop Jeremy was holding is knocked over, causing him to have to find it on the floor. When Jeremy's opening the laptop, he isn't paying attention to what's going on behind him. Frankie notices Felix's fucked up looking neck, so she tries to ask what's going on, but Felix is mind controlled. Can't lie, he looks kinda good. I like my men mind controlled and sleep deprived. Felix starts choking Frankie, and he also grabs a wooden slab. At the same time, creepy feet enter the room. The feet that have been stalking Felix. It walks right up to Jeremy. Jeremy grabs a pencil to stab the foot entity in the leg. It screeches, and the noise causes Felix to drop Frankie and snap out of his trance. She was literally about to die. Felix and Frankie are crying as Felix mutters apologies. With his wooden slab in his hand, Felix walks over to the foot entity and truly just starts beating the shit out of it for real. And I think we're supposed to find this unhinged behavior, but bitch, it's a monster. If you're bashing a literal monster that was going to kill us to bits, like, I'm never gonna be mad at that. I'm so sorry about it. I'm not gonna be unsettled by you bashing the brains of a monster. No, not me. me. Keep doing it. Jeremy is able to read a bit of the emails from his friends before the internet connection cuts out, making him unable to read the full message. Which is crazy because didn't it already load? After Felix kills the entity, it just sort of dissipates away, and Jeremy catches Felix as he falls. He sobs in Jeremy's arms. In the comments, we learned that the code Jeremy sent to the outside conspiracy theorists was turned into an actual code that the author sent to the audience members. There was a Stagtown ARG, and the author and fans took that shit serious. The actual audience got to play the part as the outside conspiracy theorist friends. It's unclear, but I think they didn't completely solve the puzzle, so that's why the internet connection cut out and Jeremy couldn't read the entire email. I could be wrong. The gang goes back home looking dejected. Felix grovels to Frankie, who tells him, all right, no more. I know it wasn't you. No one in this family is allowed to say it's all my fault anymore. Felix tells them how he was probably being influenced not to confide in them. He was just getting so scared and paranoid. They ask since when he's had that mark on his neck, and he answers, I think I got it when I fought the thing on the bridge. But they wonder why he's still infected since Frankie also ingested something before and it's long since left her system. They determine that the entity has to be nearby to control Felix, which is why it followed him everywhere. However, they're unsure how to remove it. The only thing they know of is its fear of fire. Felix jumps up from the couch, grabs a match, and runs into the bathroom. Jeremy and Frankie are frantic. Felix, you better open the fucking door. They're picking the lock while Felix lights a fire, puts it to his neck, and screams in pain. He's bleeding from his eyes and mouth. When Jeremy and Frankie burst in, Felix expels all the black stuff into the sink. Everyone's injuries get bandaged while they start to plan their next move. Jeremy laments that he wasn't able to read more of the message in time. Frankie is like, how much can we trust some internet theorists anyway? Oh my god, Frankie, chill. Those internet theorists are your readers. So in Nova's notes, there's something that says, look for me where my family isn't. What the fuck does that mean? Eventually, the gang decides that if they're gonna look for this person, who's probably dead, maybe a good place to start is a cemetery. So everybody is looking through graves when Frankie notices a giant family-style mausoleum, but it's only for one person. She covers up part of the name and notices that a small portion of it would spell Nova. She's like, y'all, I think that's it. And this arc is called Answers. We also learned that the mines were started in the 1800s, but they were never finished because the family ended up leaving town. The records only state that they hit something and there were several deaths. And then that's it. They're like, okay, but what does this have to do with the carousel? The gang has to solve puzzles to get inside the grave. Upon entering, a metal doohickey falls out and they see symbols on the floor and remember something about 3 X's from the email. They use the metal piece that fell as a key and a mechanism unlocks, revealing a hatch. What do you know? Another underground cellar. Jeremy says, I'm so thankful to the people who helped us. I really wish I could tell them. You did. You told them. Down the hatch, there's a study of sorts. It's got symbols all over the walls and it's covered in red string. There is a photo of a woman who they assume is Nova with her mom. Then they find a tape recorder that says play me, so they do. Nova on the tape says that she had moved to a town a while ago and had been unable to leave since then. She wants to see her mom again. So she's been fighting something impossible and big for years. It's finally worn her down, and she's going to leave her notes in different places throughout town in hopes that if anyone is going down the same journey as her, maybe those notes will help them out. But whatever the entity is, it's asking for help to fix something, and she's decided to go, despite knowing she will probably die. If someone is listening to this tape, it killed her. She says, it is hostile and will kill you. That is not one singular entity. It is like a rat's nest of hatred and frustration, and she knows it's connected to the carousel. She doesn't think it was just dismantled. She thinks that something very violent and bad happened. Back at home, Felix makes red thread bracelets for everyone and a collar for little friend. They also adorn part of the apartment apartment with it, and they draw symbols all over the walls. They go over what they know, which is that something terrible happened in the town. The mine shaft was built and abandoned, people died, the carousel was built, and then the carousel disappeared or something happened to it. Then later on, Nova came to town, and the entity tried to get her to help it and killed her, and now it's doing the same thing to them. Nova states in other notes that she believes the entity looks for specific characteristics. They're going over all this stuff when the power goes out. Management warns them that the power may be out for a week or more, but don't panic. It sounds like your average landlord. Meanwhile, their phones stop working entirely, and stores are no longer accepting credit cards, or cards, period, because the internet is down. Despite the chaos, people in town never panic for long, for the entity seems to force them to stop caring. I feel that some people gotta be starving to death. The gang feels that the entity is closing in on them. The trio is just quietly enjoying their day, with Frankie serving Katniss Everdeen. Then, there's knocking on the door. The gang is immediately suspicious, so they look through the peephole only to find the landlord. The landlord starts talking in a weird voice, which Frankie immediately recognizes as the same entity that was talking through Felix to her. Frankie yells at it to go away, and Jeremy thinks that the symbols might be preventing the entity from hearing what they're saying or seeing inside of the apartment. The mind-controlled landlord urges the group to let her in or people will get hurt, revealing she has a gun. Frankie looks through the peephole just in time for the landlord to say, "This is all your fault," as she pulls the trigger, shooting herself in the head. People outside are screaming frantically, but the trio huddle together in a corner. They sleep in one room on the floor. They've covered the door in even more symbols, and they didn't even open the door for the police. Late at night, Jeremy wakes up distraught. Felix wakes to comfort him, and they have this really sweet friendship moment, or maybe more than friends. I support male friendship, but this just feels a little something extra, okay? This is definitely a case for a throuple, though, in my opinion. Don't come for me and say, romance doesn't have to be in everything. I don't care. I do not care. I do not care. I'm rooting for the throuple. All three of them have chemistry with each other, okay? Thank you. Something begins pounding on the front door, so Frankie wakes up too. They all pack what they can. They pack little friend, and they climb out of the window. The next chapter is a flashback to the past again, when the rich man Charles wanted the carousel built for his grand party. This time, the story is being told from the perspective of a worker's young daughter. She talks about how stressed her father has been lately, how hard his work's been on him, and how much she wishes she could help him. Her father, I guess, has to catch live animals for the carousel and train them to let people ride on them. He says it's really hard to catch these animals alive, first of all, and it's even harder to tame them, because usually you would do it from when they're young, when they're babies, but he only has 2 months to do this, because that's what some rich asshole demands. I mean, what the hell? I thought they were going to be wooden animals. You're telling me they're supposed to be alive and tamed in 2 months. That's insane. The little girl goes to her dad and brings her favorite stuffed toy, saying, "You can use my stuffy if you want. It's very well behaved." The father is like, "Sorry, I think I need bigger animals than that. I wish the animals I was using was as well behaved as your stuffy." And she replies, "Well, my bunny wasn't always well behaved. Sometimes my bunny would act up and it would fall off the sled that I made and I would drag him." Her father asks, "Well, how did you get him to stop doing that?" And she said, "Well, I would just use pins and needles to stick him to the sled, and then he could no longer fall off." You know, that's not a bad idea, the father says. Back to the present again. With nowhere else to go, the crew decide to go to Bobby's house, the conspiracy theorist that Jeremy rented a shed from. It's the dead of night when they show up, and clearly Felix especially doesn't think this is a great idea. When they get inside the house, they notice a horrible smell. A car is in the driveway, and his house looks like nobody's been home for a while. Everyone starts looking around for Bobby, and Frankie tries to be optimistic. "Well, at least we can stay here instead of the car tonight." But Felix loses it. He starts going off picks a fight for no reason and throws plates and has a tantrum in general. Frankie and Felix have really been at each other's throats and fighting a lot since Jeremy woke up, and it's honestly a little sad. Jeremy arrives to comfort Frankie as she cries, while Felix, berating himself in a hallway for his stupidity, hears some strange noises coming from a nearby closet. Inside the closet is a small, terrified child, Ashley from the Marble House. You remember the marble girl? The one spitting out all the marbles? The gang gives Ashley some food and asks her questions about what happened. Ashley said that she and the other kids always obeyed Mrs. David because when they didn't, their stomachs would hurt. Mrs. David would sometimes give them this honey whenever they turned too weird. After Frankie left, Mrs. David said they were going to take a train out of town. They went to the train station, but she said they had to follow the tracks. Ashley didn't feel like going with her. She didn't think it felt right. Another older boy named Noah also felt like something was off, so the two left together. He taught Ashley how to spit up the bad stuff. They lived in the shed, the one Jeremy was renting, for a while, but a big bad thing came in and attacked them. Noah protected Ashley, but he got hurt in the process, and he told her that he just needed some rest, so she should go into Bobby's house. Ashley said then that Noah has been asleep for a long time while she's been here. Obviously, the gang decide to go find the second child. Inside the shed, they see the makeshift bed where Noah is bundled up. Frankie tries to wake him up and then gasps. She instructs Ashley to go inside and take a nap while they take Noah to the hospital so he can get better. Felix takes Ashley away so Jeremy and Frankie can grab a shovel and alcohol. The death of Noah was clearly portrayed despite not actually being shown, and I love when authors and artists are able to do that. I think it's so skillful. Frankie and Jeremy get drunk and bury Noah. When they're finished, everyone gathers inside to ask Ashley some questions. They ask about the honey she has. Is it the same stuff found in the caves with Jeremy? Ashley says Mrs. Davids would send the children to the mines to feed Jeremy the honey in case he changed his mind. But after her departure with all the other children, Ashley and Noah still went down to feed Jeremy every so often. This gives them the answer about how Jeremy lived all this time. He was being taken care of by the Marble children. That creepy drawing Ashley gave Frankie at the beginning of Jeremy's death, the beginning of the story, was actually just trying to show Jeremy being alive in the river. They left it for Frankie so she wouldn't worry about him. We know now that in the beginning, a lot of the stuff Frankie saw at the Marble House and with the Marble children was an illusion. They did really wear animal masks though, and I'm sure they were acting a little freaky sometimes. This also confirms that the entity keeps people alive because not just anyone can be a helper. Frankie's like, wait a minute. How did you know I knew Jeremy? I never mentioned him. And Ashley starts to answer, well, when Jeremy worked for the Marble House. But Jeremy interrupts her saying, wait, I have to be the one to say this part. He apologizes for hiding it and for dropping this revelation at all. Because really, he just didn't want them to ever find out. But he tells them that he thinks the last qualification for being the entity's helper is being an outsider, someone not from town. Frankie's confused. What are you talking about? Felix and I were born here. I just came to that apartment recently. Jeremy says, no, you didn't. You didn't graduate recently. You graduated years ago. You're years older than you think you are. Frankie and Felix start screaming in pain until Jeremy forcibly feeds them some of the honey. He apologizes profusely, saying he shouldn't have risked telling them at all. Felix and especially Frankie have been wiped so many times, everyone just decides they literally cannot discuss this right now. Unfortunately, they didn't recover any new memories either. Everyone asks Ashley if she knows a way to beat the entity, and she says no, there's nothing you can do. But she adds that you shouldn't think about bad stuff. If you think about bad things you feel guilty over, it'll get you. However, if you do have bad thoughts, you can just feed them to someone else, and it'll be okay. Though the others are confused, Jeremy adds that he knows what she's talking about. He tells them about sin eaters. The last sin eater died 100 years ago probably, but they were essentially outcasts. They were very poor. But when someone would die, the family would call a sin eater, whose purpose was to eat a loaf of bread over the dead person's body. This was considered akin to eating their sins so the deceased could go to heaven. However, the more sins a sin eater ate, the heavier their burden would get. It was seen as selling your soul. Sin eaters were so poor that they would just do this because that's the only option if they want to be able to eat. Frankie asks how Ashley had heard such a story, but of course Mrs. Davids told her. They would hear the story, make the marbles, and sell the marbles outside of town. Remember? The marble house made money by selling the marbles outside of town? Well, they still have a marble. So the gang breaks it open, and what do they find? Black goop, bitch. Jeremy proclaims, "These marbles are lures. Miss Davids had the kids make the marbles and sell them outside of town, so this way the entity can find the people it wants and lure them inside." I'd be so mad. I'd be so mad if I'm an outsider and I'm just at a little state fair or something. I'm trying to support these orphans. I buy their marbles, and now I'm stuck in your fuck-ass town with nothing to do, no good food, and you got monsters. The fuck? Everyone sort of drifts apart to process what they've learned. Frankie finds Jeremy sitting outside, so she sits next to him and asks how long they've been friends. He says, "I thought you didn't want to think about that." And she replies, "I know, but I just want to know about what I lost. I was thinking about my family, and I haven't thought about them in ages. I don't even know when the last time I saw them was." As she's saying all this, Jeremy starts to cry. It's okay, she says. "It's not your fault." But Jeremy continues, "It's just that I lost everything, and then I lost you. And there are all these memories that I have, but will never get back." She comforts him, kisses him on the cheek, and says that he didn't lose anyone. As they're going inside, Frankie points out that she had his UFO keychain. He's like, "Oh, thanks, I wouldn't want to lose that." She asks, "Where did you get that anyway?" And he replies, "It was just a gift from someone special." Everyone sets up a blanket fort in the living room together and has a little sleepover while Jeremy keeps watch. The next morning, they've covered all the windows in the house, and Frankie and Felix go on their way to the grocery store. They decided to leave Jeremy and Ashley behind, much to Felix's displeasure. On the drive, Felix apologizes for snapping at Frankie the other day, to which she responds by telling him not to worry about it. They pick out all their groceries quickly and they go to the register, but the clerk just stares at them. Felix is like, "What? You got something to say?" Frankie grabs his arm and says, "Felix, everybody is looking at us." Everyone in the grocery store is staring at them, glaring at them. And it literally reminds me of when I'm going to North Florida. Oh my God. That's the look that these people have. The look that they're giving Frankie and Felix. Felix throws money at the counter and they take their groceries to book it outside. They try to head towards the Jeep, but the townspeople are smashing it and rolling it over. The townsfolk notice them and immediately initiate chase. Felix and Frankie have to toss the food and run into a building with a bunch of storage units, find one that isn't locked, and they hide inside, just waiting. In the meantime, Ashley and Jeremy are back at the house as Jeremy gets more and more nervous over the passing time. Jeremy asks Ashley about the monster she saw. She says it has big eyes and big teeth. Bobby must have seen it and just left. Back in the storage unit, Frankie and Felix are hiding behind some boxes, terrified at the prospect of being discovered by the townspeople. Suddenly, someone comes inside the unit. They don't see Frankie and Felix, but they do lock the door on their way out, closing Frankie and Felix inside. Frankie fails to pick the lock because she can't reach it. Her arms are too short, so her and Felix immediately start fighting again. Felix finally bursts out, "Have you ever thought I liked Jeremy too?" And Frankie's like, "What?" And he's like, "What? Weird timing, but okay." Like, it didn't really fit in the context of the conversation. But Felix explains that he didn't always feel this way, but Jeremy's been so nice and he's done so much for everyone, and Felix didn't realize it until recently. Does this mean he doesn't like Frankie romantically as well? I'm not sure, because they've had some blushy moments, but it's unclear if Felix is gay or bisexual. I choose to believe everyone here is bisexual. I think if the author is brave, this is the time. There has been no better time to have a throuple. They've adopted a child now, okay? It's all set up. This is their child. You can't just split your kid up, okay? Child of divorced parents right here. I mean, it can be rough. So keep them together. Frankie guides Felix through picking the lock, and he manages to do it. He also swears her to secrecy, and they run out. The next chapter shifts to the perspective of the animals in the 19th century on the carousel. We see a little girl get on a deer, and the carousel is decorated with birds in cages. The deer aren't stapled to the carousel, luckily, but they are locked in place with chains. As the carousel starts, the author does an excellent job of conveying the confusion and fear the animals feel unreal. The bird is bouncing all over the place in its little cage, and the deer's eyes are moving rapidly, having no idea what's happening. They can't move. It seems like a really, really bad experience for the animals, but of course they have no voice. They can't say anything. When the party's over, guests get to leave, but the animals are still chained in place. Wolves approach. The deer, of course, freak out, literally snapping their legs in an attempt to escape. The next morning, people come to clean up and discover a bloodbath. And my thought process right now, okay, reading this is some nature getting revenge shit. And you know what? I get it. Go off, dear God. They're gonna tell you were wrong, but guess what? I'm on your side. After this, Stagtown became barren. All of the crops dried up with no one able to explain it. They had a beautiful bounty before, but now it became incredibly difficult to catch any animals. And the deer had just disappeared. There were none to be found at all. People were freaking out, hoping to at least get through the winter with what little they had. They didn't want to point fingers because the rich family on the hill was still boosting the economy by buying things and employing the townspeople. But desperation sets in as most people couldn't afford to relocate to a different town. Stagtown was running out of food. People started leaving gifts at the edge of the forest, praying and fasting, but nothing was working. And quietly, they would talk at night about the curse brought upon them because of the cruelty of the rich man and his family. These whispers stayed indoors until a rumor spread that the rich man and his family were planning to leave town without a word, leaving the town that they had cursed. The townspeople were like, we're not having that shit. And honestly, I get it. Put them on the carousel too. The fuck? Put them all on the carousel. Put the baby on the carousel too. But boom, we back in the present, baby. Frankie and Felix are running. They know they have to make it back into town, but neither can hotwire a car. Frankie points out that they're not being chased though. Instead, it seems like there's just a crowd of people somewhere else. Frankie then hears something, turning in time to see a car frantically driving like a maniac. The car is speeding down the road until a random possessed person just jumps in front of it. They're just like, it's my time. Who gets out of the car to check what they hit? Bobby. Conspiracy theory characters in this genre always come in at the end. I think they usually survive too. But yeah, they always make their grand reappearance at the end. So Bobby is like, the hell y'all two doing out here? And he yells at them to get in the back of the truck and zips off. Bobby tells them that he saw a giant monster outside his house one day. So he hauled ass to one of his campsites. He had run out of food and came to town to get some supplies when he noticed all townspeople were possessed or something. I don't know what this accent is. Frankie and Felix try to explain the possession thing going on, but Bobby is convinced it's government mind control. However, he has a metal plate in his brain, so it won't get him allegedly. You know, he actually avoided being possessed because he doesn't drink the water, but that's just semantics. God bless. They have the idea that people are looking for Bobby's truck, so the three of them steal a different car to continue the drive back to Bobby's cabin. Bobby is adamant that he will not return to the house. Instead, he will be leaving town. And Frankie and Felix try to inform him that he can't, but Bobby is insistent that he needs to try. Before leaving, he tells them about his other supply house and the lock code to get in. Bobby drops them off near the house before leaving. That was nice of him. When Frankie and Felix make it back to the house, they burst through the door and they're like, Jeremy, get your ass up, get your shit, let's go. Jeremy's confused, but they give no time to ask questions. Everyone shuffles out the back door and into the woods to find the hidden supply house. Jeremy is able to deduce its location through conspiracy theorist powers, leading them to a hatch. At this point, the townspeople are already done ransacking Bobby's house, coming towards the woods. The group goes inside the bunker where they see a wealth of supplies, toilet, shower, a ton of food and water, a bicycle for escaping zombies, TV with VHS tapes, and a surveillance system. Like, this place, I swear, it would rent for like what, $3,000 in Miami? The surveillance system allows them to watch all the townspeople as they fail to find where they are and leave. Frankie and Felix take stock of their supplies, and during that time, Felix thanks her for not telling Jeremy what he said. She kind of goes off, accusing Felix of not necessarily liking Jeremy, but only falling for him because they're in a stressful situation, akin to the suspension bridge effect. Frankie is like, I draw the line at my friends being gay. No, I'm kidding. Frankie is an ally. She questions why it took him all this time to realize his alleged feelings and explains that Jeremy is her friend, and she knows that people sometimes form unhealthy attachments to someone else during a time of turmoil without the other person realizing that what they're feeling isn't real. Felix isn't sure what to think of this and ponders, but he then asks Frankie what she thinks about Jeremy, and she's not having it. She's like, boy, do not talk to me about this bullshit. We can talk about romance after I survive, bitch. And I mean, I can't lie, she is real for that. She is. Like, they then take a glance at the security camera only to see a giant black blur by the house, clearly looking for them, and then it seems like it starts to go right over the hatch. Little friend hisses. This next arc is called Fight. Everyone is getting antsy-pantsy in the bunker. 2 of the surveillance cameras go out as the entity is clearly interfering. It doesn't know where they are yet though exactly. Frankie announces she's sick of waiting. Let's fight. Felix adds, we got a cat, a kid, no weapons, and no car, but let's do it. Jeremy is also down, making Molotov cocktails as they speak. Like, I love that Frankie just declared they're going to fight, and they were like, yep, we're already ready. Truly ride or die. So Frankie says they're going to die anyway, so they might as well burn it all down with them. So the plan is this. Use the bike to get to Frankie's car that was left at the train station. Use the supplies in her trunk to get the car running again, because it's probably not. Drive back slowly with the headlights off, pick up the others from the bunker, and drive to the mines. Ashley knows the way to the mines from all the times that she went to feed Jeremy, and the only thing left to do now is draw straws to find out who is taking the bike to the train station. Jeremy, of course, rigged it, so he is the one to draw the short straw. Thankfully, Jeremy makes it to the train station safely. He fixes up Frankie's car best he could and starts to leave when he notices a deer watching him from the woods. He gets the fuck out of there. In that time period, Frankie and Felix discuss what to do with Ashley because they determine they can't take a child down to the mines where they may die, and they will definitely be setting off explosives. At the same time, she's too young and small to leave in the bunker. She literally can't close the hatch behind them when they leave. They also want all 3 of the adults to be present in the fight. So the best plan they come up with is to gather as many supplies as they can in the car, make a little campsite for Ashley to wait with little friend, and hopefully at least one person makes it back alive to take care of her. And if not, she'll at least have supplies for a little while. Ashley asks them if they'll die down there and reveals that she knows Noah's dead. She's scared for the group. And I'm gonna be real, okay? It's real irresponsible of Frankie to try and sugarcoat things. Y'all may very well die. Prepare the child for that reality. They tell her that little friend is at least very good at spotting monsters. Felix calls Frankie over to look at the camera where they see the same black shadow from earlier closing in on the hatch. It jump scares their ass and then cuts the cameras. The pair worry about Jeremy, who is on his way to them without knowing that the monster is right fucking outside. Meanwhile, Jeremy's driving with his headlights on. Like, I literally thought we just discussed this, sir. I thought you were supposed to drive back with your headlights off. And now what? You just trying to alert the neighborhood. Suddenly, the power goes out in the bunker. Bobby don't got a generator going? We see Jeremy running from the entity. It corners him against a tree, leading Jeremy to blast it with his homemade flamethrower, but it lashes out, causing him to drop the lighter. The monster gapes its giant mouth with rows of sharp teeth and hands, but Felix and Frankie show up with their own flamethrowers and blast the bitch to save their man. Everyone rushed into the car with only 1 bag of supplies. They did not have time to pack everything. At the mine tunnel, the gang takes out a blanket and snacks for Ashley. They instruct her not to open the door for anyone, and if anyone approaches the car, be a very quiet rock. She again wonders if they'll die, but the group stupidly promises her that they won't. And seriously, y'all should prepare the child. How long should she wait before assuming y'all are dead? What should she do then? Where should she go? She needs to know this. As the trio approach the mines, Jeremy starts to say, Frankie, if we don't make it out, I just want to say, and she interrupts him. I don't want to hear it. That's bitch ass quitter talk. Tell me later when we win. Felix starts to say to Jeremy, if we don't make it out, and Jeremy shuts him down the same way Frankie did to him. They then enter the mines with their homemade flamethrowers, matches, and UFO keychain. The next chapter is a continuation of the flashback to the past. The townspeople killed the rich family and stuffed them in coffins. They burnt the coffins, hoping that this would satisfy the forest, but all it did was light the forest on fire. Y'all gotta be so fucking stupid. The fire left nothing. The town was completely desolate now. A sin eater passes through town, so the townspeople take the opportunity to ask him to eat the sins of the rich family. He refuses, and they're offering him the same shitty deal that they'd give for eating a regular sin, by the way, okay? There was no special fee for taking on a huge curse that's cursing the whole town. So he refuses, leading the townspeople to kill him in frustration. Like, I gotta be honest, I did say, y'all, get your lick back at the rich family, whatever, but it was a townsperson who came up with the idea of chaining the animals. Now, the rich man had the stupid ass idea to do all this in 2 months. I'm just saying, y'all culpable too. Eventually, everyone who was there at the start of all this dies, but their souls seem to be kept by something. Their souls just drip beneath the town full of rage and despair and guilt. And many years later, the carousel's built again. In the present, our team is moving through the dark, trying to figure out a plan. They know the carousel is deep in the mines where a lot of the black sludge has pooled. Maybe we can just go there, set the sludge on fire, and light up any straggling bits afterwards. Very straightforward plan. I like it. But unfortunately, they're in a river system. There's water flowing through the mines, remember? Wait, I just stepped in something, Frankie says, glancing down. It's not water, it's black goo. Goo that is breaking the walls to let river water flow in. The entity clearly knows they want to set it on fire, so it's wetting all of their supplies. The river that's flowing in is now incredibly fast, and it's rising. The group gets swept away, of course breaking their Molotov cocktails and ruining most of their supplies. They have no choice but to follow the water. They try their best to stay together, to stay left, but they happen upon a split in the tunnel. Frankie gets separated from the boys. She's going through one tunnel while they go through another. At the same time, Little Friend and Ashley are in the car, hiding under the blanket, but Little Friend starts hissing. Ashley sees a silhouette approaching the car. Back at the mines, Frankie got washed away to some deep part of the cave. She's on a bit of a rocky terrain and she's having a breakdown. She's crying. Her matches are wet. She has the keychain for a tiny bit of light, but she thinks, I can't do this anymore. She notices on the other side of the cave that there's a fucking tape recorder. She plays it. The tape recorder starts speaking. It's Frankie here. We see from the perspective of Frankie years ago. She is down in the mines recording because Jeremy taught her to always record what she's doing. Frankie is scouting out the mines for Jeremy's birthday present, knowing he'd really appreciate this adventure. She definitely has a different energy than the Frankie we know now. She stumbles upon the carousel and she's like, holy shit, this is so fucking cool. Jeremy's gonna blow his lid when he sees this, but it's got some dark water underneath it. She touches it. This isn't water. What the hell is this? And then the dark liquid moves. It's alive or something. Frankie fucking books it, dropping the tape recorder and everything. The dark liquid reaches out, picks up the tape and messes around, pausing, rewinding, recording. It learns how this small device functions. When Frankie leaves the mines, she exclaims that she has to tell everyone, but suddenly she's zapped and goes back to her apartment. Where have you been? I've been calling you all day, Jeremy demands. She hits him with the, sorry, do I know you? So present time, Frankie realizes that she woke the entity up and taught it about replacing memories and stuff. I do feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, like dropping the tape recorder taught it to place memories. I don't know. Frankie feels like it really is all her fault. Despondent, Frankie simply follows the black goo to the carousel. It leads her down the stairs that she and Felix once refused to go down. She looks defeated as she's brought into this giant room with a huge pillar in the center and an altar in front of it. And on top of the altar is black goo, and on top of that is a loaf of bread. Frankie begs, I just want to know why. The tar takes the shape of a monster and agrees. Very well, I will tell you. It explains that they angered the forest god, so it cursed them. They offered the life of the Sin Eater, but that didn't appease it either. Everyone who died in town, their souls would just drip down into the earth, eventually becoming a tangled mess. They were like a nest of rats. All they could do is wait. Eventually, the people of Stagtown built another carousel, angering the entity. They did not want to further offend the forest god, so they swallowed the carousel, every man, woman, and child. Those souls then joined them in their misery. As the combined souls eventually realized, they never completed the Sin Eater ritual. They learned of Nova and forced her to eat the bread. When nothing happened, they killed her. They came to the conclusion that it was because Nova wasn't an outsider, but the original Sin Eater was. It then tried to force Jeremy, but that didn't work. So now, here it has Frankie. They demand Frankie eat the bread to absolve them of their sins, releasing them from their suffering. Frankie basically tells them to fuck off. They're gonna kill her anyway when it doesn't work. And the goo entity is like, yeah, true, I hear you. What about now though? And it pulls Jeremy and Felix out of some tar. It claims it'll let her friends go if she eats the bread. But Jeremy and Felix then argue over who should eat the bread. No, I'll do it. No, I'll do it. No, I want to be the one to die. No, me. Frankie yells at them to stop. She turns to the monster and says, okay, I know what happened. There's no angry forest god, just a terrible incident and a string of bad luck, and then you killed those people, and you didn't know what to do. You felt guilty, and you had to blame it on something. And all you've been doing is blaming everything else and everyone else because you don't want responsibility. So, who am I eating this bread for? Which one of you is the most guilty? The entity is getting pissed until one head comes out to proclaim, the rich man, he started it. And another head appears. No, the workers. It was their idea. More heads come out and argue. Felix says maybe Frankie shouldn't short circuit the monster's many brains because it's suffocating them. An idea blooms in Frankie's mind. The monster lashes out and the cave begins to crumble. It lashes at Frankie too as she desperately tries to open the UFO keychain. She fucks with the battery. The monster swipes it out of her hands. Too little, too late. A spark starts. One thing about the monster, remember, it's highly flammable. So that shit goes up in flames. Someone in the comments said it's fitting that everything ends with a UFO and tinfoil, and I thought that was a good comment. The entity is screaming. Frankie and the boys run through the mines as it continues falling apart. They just barely make it out in time thanks to Frankie remembering her past self on the tape recorder, pointing out footholds in the tunnel. The ground rumbles and there's an earthquake of fire. The group makes it to the car, only to see a bunch of people lying on the ground around it. They get inside the car while Ashley cries that these people were trying to get in until they suddenly just drop to the ground. The whole town seems to be falling apart, likely because the entity made way too many sinkholes. Its demise is causing the entire town to be brought down with it. The gang determines that they have to try the bridge now, but it's crumbling too. And it is also fitting that it ends with this bridge. Just barely they make it out on the other side of the bridge. The group goes through the tunnel while the entity is screaming for them to go back. Frankie yells, "Not this time, bitch!" She didn't actually say that. Finally, they make it out onto the other side of the tunnel. Salvation. Officially out of town, they stop in a field to watch the sunrise. The whole time, the comic has been very monochromatic, like everyone is one color. But finally, for the first time, we have color. Everyone's in color, and it's weird. It's really weird. Frankie marvels at how good it feels to watch the sunrise, to be out of that long, dark night. She doesn't know if the thing is still alive, but it's not her problem anymore. She's really real for that, to be honest. I gotta admit, that would be me too. And that's it. It's done. The next chapter is sort of a bonus chapter, just breaking the fourth wall and advertising the author's next comic. I mean, it's cute, but I really wish there was an actual epilogue. I'm an epilogue girly. It does mention that the characters of Stagtown will make an appearance in the author's next comic, so I will be looking forward to that. I'm gonna read the author's next thing. Even if it's a different genre entirely, I'm a bit of a stan now. They're going in the complete opposite direction. I support them. I support it. The author does characters really well, so no matter what, I'm excited. My review will be in 3 parts. Let's just get this out of the way. This is not me saying I can do better. I am a humble reader who is telling you what I like and don't like on a personal scale. This work is better than I could do. I can't even stick to making a single comic at all. That, however, does not make it above criticism. We will also be discussing art, which is similar to discussing the writing style of a book. So here we go. Visuals. Stagtown has so much charm. Most obviously, it's monochromatic for 99% of the comic, and usually I find monochromatic in webtoon format to be sort of boring. It's easy to lose focus when you're used to color. However, in this case, they still do a great job of making it look interesting. There's still very slight color variances, and each character has their own hue. Despite the characters being minorly color-coded, similar to Lore Olympus, they're recognizable without that. The art style sort of reminds me of Disney or old cartoons. It's not extremely detailed, and the anatomy is not technically among the best I've read. It doesn't need to be, though. At no point did I feel that the author was making a mistake. Rather, this simple and relaxed anatomy felt purposeful and immersive. The art style is not among my favorites on my own objective scale, but it fits this comic so well. Also, there's clearly so much effort put into the characters and backgrounds. It shows. The author makes minis as reference instead of 3D models. I think 3D models are a fantastic resource, but at times it can make art styles feel stiff. Stagtown does not have that problem. The paneling is expertly done. It is common for webtoons to have a bit of a simpler approach to panels, as anything else is too time-consuming. Paneling in Stagtown is a storytelling device in itself. It is a treat to witness. In fact, all of this together makes me worried for the author. Did you get enough sleep? I fear all of this was too much work for one person. Finally, I have to mention the logos for each arc. Ridiculous. So good it's stupid. Author needs to pick a focal point and stick to it, because you're making the rest of us look bad by being so good at so many different things. Like, I'm getting angry. Not sure what else to mention. The art is great. It's again not my favorite art style, but it feels perfect for this comic, and I fear I have to give it a 10 in this area. There's nothing I would change about the art. And I got these antlers for the review section, but they're not staying well. They're about to fall off. I can barely move my head. They gotta go. It was like $10 wasted. Characters. I'm going in a random order for the characters here. So after my raving over the art style, I'd like to take this in a more hater direction. Except I don't hate anyone, so a more mild criticism direction. Starting with Felix. I fucking loved Felix. I think he was introduced at the perfect point in the story. Just as the episodic nature of the cursed town may become a bit stale, Felix comes in and immediately adds new dynamics. He helped to raise the stakes. It's hard to explain, but I think sometimes you can just tell, you know it in your soul, that certain characters won't die. This was not a kill the main character story. I felt in my bones that Frankie would live to the end. But Felix being introduced added a level of stress that wasn't there before, because suddenly I wasn't so sure someone wouldn't die. And granted, that didn't last the entire time, but still, he felt lovable and expendable. His dynamic with Frankie was such a treat. Felix added much needed light moments. He added comic relief, but he's also deeper than just that. I feel like I know him. He has enough quirks and flaws for me to feel that he's an actual person. And speaking of flaws, Felix does have quite a few. He's so obsessed with protecting others to a point that not only endangers himself, but endangers others by not keeping them in the loop. He's also extremely headstrong with a short temper. There's a layer of violence that Felix is capable of that Jeremy and Frankie aren't, but Felix is also exceedingly loyal. He is a friend you'd want to have in an apocalyptic scenario. He is ride or die. If Felix walked in on one of his best friends beating the shit out of a random person, Felix gonna jump in and start swinging at them too. No explanation needed. They must have deserved it. But his character took a huge downgrade, in my opinion, ever since Jeremy was introduced. Felix sort of went from being Frankie's rock to someone who constantly antagonizes her. Him and Frankie were at each other's throats constantly, to a point that was just sad as someone who enjoyed their family dynamic. Dio and Jojo are just going at it right now. They're just going crazy. It's because honestly, Dio is so bad. He is so bad. He is a menace to everyone. He's really cute and he's really small though. It's realistic to a point, but it's odd because Jeremy wasn't exactly given that same realism in that regard. It felt as if the author was fighting back against the Franklick's allegations by making Felix a worse option so people wouldn't ship it anymore. And I'm specifically talking about before Felix admitted to liking Jeremy. Speaking of that, Felix and Jeremy had chemistry. I can totally see him liking Jeremy. The way it was revealed was so out of nowhere. It made no sense even in context. It truly was just dropped in the most unnatural way. I was really disappointed with how that revelation was handled, and further that it was immediately revealed that his feelings may not even be real. Like, what were we supposed to do with that? And this is all at the end of the comic. What was even the point of that arc? Again, it just sort of feels like it was there to solidify Frankie and Jeremy as a couple. Back to Felix and Jeremy's chemistry though, it was totally there, but it was also very subtle, and I don't think it was developed enough before it boiled over with Felix admitting his feelings. I think we could have had more moments between them. Anyway, truly, a lot of fights Felix and Frankie had just felt forced. It was constant, with neither of them having it out with Jeremy as well. Perhaps this was to build tension, to build up Felix's jealousy over Jeremy, but I don't think that was super clear or well done if that's the case. Anyway, I love him though, but he was better in the first half of the comic. Ashley, she was a minor character, but she was cute. I liked that we misunderstood her, and I feel like that was well done. Little Friend, perfect character, 10 out of 10, no notes. I love Littles. She was such a good pet sidekick. She didn't take over or feel gimmicky, but she added some tension herself because you worry for her, and she comforted characters in pivotal moments. Her chapter was also great. Just a great character. Bobby. I'm sorry, but Bobby voted for Trump. Nova. This is tricky. I feel that she was sort of unnecessary. I'm not sure how to say it. Like, she was a good plot device because she explains how the characters kept finding these notes and hints, but the character herself didn't feel like anything other than that plot device. She didn't even solve much. She didn't solve anything really. I understand she was only introduced very briefly, but in my soul, I just feel she was underdeveloped. Underused, maybe. Jeremy. Gotta preface this by saying I love Jeremy. He's hard not to love. His character was so expertly developed in the beginning. He starts out as this weird little guy, someone you feel is odd and maybe even creepy, but quite quickly it's clear that he's not so crazy. And then throughout the story, without Jeremy even being present, you learn more about him. You learn about him through flashbacks and clues, and you realize how resilient Jeremy actually was, how great of a person he was, and that was so expertly done. Just us becoming so fond of this character when they're not even alive anymore, allegedly. Remember how confident Frankie was that she could survive the abandoned farmhouse cellar in the beginning because Jeremy did? And then by the end, Frankie realizes she underestimated him. He's actually very strong, both physically and mentally. Perhaps Jeremy is even the strongest of all of them. Jeremy also did a good job of fitting in immediately, despite being reintroduced so late in the story. It does feel like it came at the expense of Felix a little bit, a lot bit, but the family dynamic between the three main characters was so lovely and well done. This is one of my favorite found families ever, okay? I love these three. I hope they live together forever. By the end, it almost feels like Jeremy is a little too perfect compared to the others. He definitely has a self-sacrificing nature, which can be a flaw, but I'm not sure how much that was really explored. And compared to Felix, Jeremy pretty much was never shown in a negative light. I think even Frankie was shown more negatively at times. I think he could have been more humanized. He's carrying a lot of grief for just one person, but there was really no actual like boiling point. You know, there was that time he cried, but that's not a flaw. That's just emotion. I don't know. What do y'all think? I don't necessarily feel like I would change much about Jeremy, but maybe give some of Felix and Frankie's tense moments to him and maybe explore his self-sacrificing nature more as a flaw. The Entity. Probably my least favorite character. I think I liked it better when I thought it was a dear God getting revenge. The guilty townspeople angle just didn't do it for me, and the idea that guilt is how it has power over you felt a little confusing, because I'm pretty sure it has power over you by you ingesting it. Like, it physically does things to have power over you, so I didn't quite understand that guilt part at the end. And the Entity was also sort of confusing confusing as for what it was capable of. It couldn't do a bunch of physical things because it had no body above the surface, so it used Felix. But at the same time, it later develops a physical body that follows Felix around, and he physically kills it. I think the Rat King analogy was cool, and as an aside, I appreciate the author teaching the audience random facts in the description. The entity also confused me over what it wanted, since there were times it definitely attempted to literally kill the main cast, despite needing them. You have no one else, like why are you killing them? And it also just did a shitty job of guiding them. With so many things being given explanations, the sinkholes, the Rat King of Souls, it was weird how certain things still didn't make much sense. How does the entity disconnect them from the internet? I think its power level was just very inconsistent. This isn't a huge deal because this is horror, and I think horror is really allowed a certain level of mysticism that other genres aren't afforded. Horror can leave mysteries unsolved or inconsistencies unexplained, and it's a little more okay. But that's all I got on that. Frankie. She my girl. I love Frankie. To be honest, she's actually pretty empty as a character. I couldn't tell you a ton about present Frankie the way I could Jeremy and Felix. Like, she's just trying to survive. What was her job even? What did she like to do? She's very much a blank slate, but in the context of the story, this makes sense. We understand that all of the times she was wiped affected her personality, as she used to be much more vibrant and excitable. But I think we could have sprinkled in more of her old personality towards the end, especially as she's getting memories back. Because even at the end of the story, I still couldn't tell you a lot about Frankie. She's very smart, she's brave, she's determined, she lashes out when she feels cornered, or when she's done something wrong. Frankie bottles things up, much like how the boys do. You have an idea of how she'd react in certain situations, like we know her, and yet we don't know anything about her. Does that make sense? I just wish we learned more. That being said, I still adored her. She was awesome to read about, and she guided the story in such a sensible way. Frankie never really frustrated me as horror protagonists are wont to do. She had common sense and she was relatable. Characters are overall an 8 out of 10, I think. Yeah, 8 out of 10. I love them and their found family dynamic. They were so precious to me and I'm sad to see them go. Story. This is the area I'm most torn on. Stagtown was such a pleasure to breeze through. I consumed it while on the mini Stairmaster and it kept me so immersed that I didn't even realize it. I was on it for fucking 2 hours, bitch. Over 2 hours in one go. Okay, I was getting fit off Stagtown. Now I haven't worked out in weeks. A common problem I find in webtoons is that stories are stuck in a very go from point A to B, back to A, then B format. And it just literally jumps from one scene to the next with no real transition at all. So a ton of time technically passes in a single episode. Days and days and days. As it's clear the author doesn't know how to move the story in a more natural manner. Like, I was reading True Beauty at the same time as this. And so in True Beauty, the characters literally go scene A, school, scene B, home, scene C, school the next day, scene D, home. And it feels disjointed and just not planned out well. You're not utilizing all of the spaces to their full potential. Does that make sense? You're not moving the plot in an efficient way. Stagtown is the opposite of that. The plot flowed like a fucking river. Scenes naturally bled into the next and ended on a suspenseful note that led to the next arc. Passing of time did not feel jarring at any point, at any time. I felt like the author utilized every scene and setting to its fullest before moving on to the next one. And then there's the mystery. What fun it was! The mystery was so much fun to think about and attempt to solve. My husband couldn't stop theorizing while I was doing my voice notes. He was able to pick up on a few things ahead of time, and he was so excited about it. Horror stories sometimes don't have very rewarding reveals because they usually end up being explained away by this happened because it's creepy. But Stagtown did not do that very often. It really tied things back to smaller details from an earlier point in the story, making it very satisfying to read. The ending explanation felt a little flat to me, a la the Rat King. I've already explained why I'm not in love with it. It just wasn't totally satisfying. And again, the author tried their best to neatly give explanations to most mysteries, but a few just just felt a little forced. The cameras being because Nova taught it about cameras, or the tape recorder teaching it about rewinding, recording memories. And then the ending? Towards the end, I felt pretty confident about the three main characters' plot armor. By the time they were in the caves, I was convinced that no one would die. The stakes just didn't stay up for some reason. And it's not impossible to have a story where the main cast doesn't die, but the stakes stay up. It is difficult though. The last chapters sort of fizzled the flames. That's not a very egregious problem, and I can get over it. It's just they were somehow less suspenseful. Even though it was like the big arc, you know, the big battle, there was less tension. What's very unfortunate to me is that there was no real closure. This is such a big problem in the horror genre, but I didn't expect it from Stagtown. Okay, I want to know what's happening years later. I hate not knowing. What the fuck happens to the curse, the town, Bobby, our main family? Where does everyone end up? It just feels like the author didn't know how to wrap these up, so they didn't. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, because this author is anything but lazy. Like, they put so much effort into everything, so I just feel that they know what happens. They just didn't tell us. And the ending left an unsatisfied taste in my mouth. I think it was a missed opportunity. I also think they're being a fucking coward, because where's the throuple? You were afraid, okay? Look me in my eyeball, even though I said to leave this video. You were scared. You were scared. You cannot convince me otherwise. The ships were there. The foundation was all there. The boats were built and loaded. They were ready to set sail. And I fear that's at least 1 point off the final score. But my husband says it's 2. Okay, so it sounds like a joke, and it half is, but I truly think this is Castlevania levels of egregiously missed throuple opportunity. You didn't even have to outright say it. You could just show the family living in a place together years later, and the shippy bitches will do the rest. Again, I know I'll lose a lot of people with this point. Stagtown was a horror, not a romance, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't hear you. Shut up. And like, the throuple doesn't even have to be that they're all bisexual and all into each other. It could just be Jeremy at the center, and then, you know, he got Felix on one arm and Frankie on the other. Fuck. Anyway, I think if I was reading this while it was ongoing, I would have been really sad at the last chapter essentially being an ad for their next comic. An ad chapter is totally fine, but for the last one with no closure otherwise, it's rough out here. Regardless, I am now a fan of this author, and I will be tuning into their next thing. I may even have to buy some merch. So I need y'all to rack the views up on this video, so this way I can get that ad money. Iggy, it's okay. I need y'all to rack up the views on this video so I can use the ad money to get some fucking merch, okay? Shit, help a girl out. Iggy. Sorry guys, he wants attention. Iggy. So the story gets an 8 out of 10 for me. Lack of closure and a few weak wrap-ups were what's stopping it from honestly being a 10. The final score is like an 8.6. When I first finished it, I felt more confident about it being a 9, but now that I've had time to sit with it and write this review and now record it, I'm less sure. So like an 8.6 to 9. I think it depends on how I'm feeling that day, a tentative 9 if you will. And today, right now at this moment, I'm actually feeling a little more 9-y. It's a score that definitely would have been solidified if I got my fucking throuple. This is my most positive review, which naturally means it'll be the lowest watched. But if you're here, if you liked this video, please physically leave a like. If you didn't like it and you came this far, that's dedication to haterism that I just have to respect. Anyways, you can leave suggestions though for what you want to see next. I have in the lineup Everything is Fine and True Beauty for surezies. These are already solidified, already being written. I'll see you next time. Say bye, Iggy. Okay, bye.